listener production.
Hey, Chris Spyrou with you. Happy Friday and welcome to The Briefing. Tomorrow is Election Day. 1 in 4 of us have already voted in this country, but if you haven't, don't worry, we've got you, because we're going to run you through everything you need to know before heading to the ballot box. And for those of you who already have voted, stick around because we break down a bunch of common questions and misconceptions you might not have known. Our election guide is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Tara Cassidy. It's Friday, the 2nd of May.
Good morning, Chris, and to you listening, happy Friday. It is the final official day of campaigning before the federal election. Woohoo! With both Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton on a last-ditch blitz of some of the most marginally held seats in the country before polls open tomorrow. While Peter Dutton has been focusing on 28 battleground electorates heading to Adelaide and WA today, Albo ticked off the two states yesterday and is expected to spend much of today in Brisbane. Meanwhile, attention's now turned to the Coalition's budget costings that were released yesterday, showing an overall stronger budget bottom line across 4 years by nearly $14 billion, while the first 2 years of an LNP government would be $7.9 billion worse off than Labor's plans. It claims the following 2 years would be nearly $22 billion stronger.
One of the costliest inclusions in the budget is the LNP's nuclear power plan, listed for an eventual $118 billion. It also pledged to create a fund it says will safeguard future generations and mean governments couldn't rely on surprise savings or funding to meet ambitious budget promises. Meanwhile, most of the Coalition's savings will be shaved from the public service sector via tens of thousands of job cuts, as well as the addition of a vaping tax. The Coalition wants to allow retailers beyond pharmacies to be able to sell vapes legally in a bid to both tax it, crack down on organised crime and discourage young Aussies via higher prices.
To Victoria now, where a police investigation is underway into a man who was caught on video punching and kicking a Trumpet of Patriots volunteer at a pre-polling centre in Melbourne's southeast.
Oi! 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 Cut it out!
Yeah, we were built on multiculturalism. Yeah, these ads aren't what Australia is about.
And it's unclear whether the man was speaking about the party's policies or the spam text messages that everyone's been getting there. Meanwhile, Vic Police say the exact circumstances of the incident are still being investigated, with a vehicle damaged but no one requiring medical treatment.
Yeah, and it comes as across state lines, New South Wales Police have launched multiple investigations in the last week looking into alleged election-related violence, harassment and antisocial behaviour. Some of those incidents include the smearing of poo across a truck with a Liberal Party ad on it, as well as threats of arson on campaign officers and fighting over campaign signs. It was also on Tuesday that an 18-year-old was charged after Peter Dutton's Brisbane electorate office was covered in red paint and posters. She is expected to face court later this month.
Yeah, and speaking of Dutton, yesterday he had to phone into an in-person interview in his home electorate citing security concerns.
Is there a reason why you're not here at Strathpine Centre?
Well, I think the AFP had some concerns about some people who were gathering there, as I'm advised, so we take the advice.
That audio thanks to the ABC. And look, the AFP have had to set up task force for this campaign because, look, we've seen protesters that have been crashing the different locations where both Albo and Peter Dutton have been going along the campaign.
Yeah, I mean, we saw last month that protesters had entered the lobby of Anthony Albanese, where he was staying in a hotel lobby. That wasn't information available to the public, so there were heaps of questions about how they found out, who told them, and that's no doubt something that's been playing on the minds of both leaders, especially after we found out about that alleged terror plot on Peter Dutton's home back in 2024. We found out about that this year. It's just wild to me that we're seeing this trickling into Australian politics. I mean, one commentator I read came out and said, this is un-Australian, this behaviour is un-Australian, and I happen to agree.
The trial of Erin Patterson, the woman accused of killing multiple relatives after serving a beef Wellington dish, including poisonous mushrooms, will continue today. On day one, the Crown accused Erin of having foraged for death cap mushrooms, which she later served at the lunch in 2023.
The prosecutor claimed when questioned by police about where the mushrooms came from, Patterson lied and said they were from an Asian grocer. The prosecution's also alleging she lied about owning a food dehydrator and about having cancer. Patterson's defence lawyer said she panicked after people died after eating the meal she'd served and argued her use of the deadly mushrooms was not deliberate. The Crown hasn't offered up any motive for the alleged murders and attempted murder.
Yeah, and look, on day 2 of the trial, the court heard from Simon Patterson, who is Erin's estranged husband, for the first time, and he said that he'd been invited to that lunch but pulled out the night before. And he says Erin was disappointed, claiming that she said she'd spent a small fortune on beef eye fillet to make the dish and had spent hours preparing the lunch. The court also heard that Erin had claimed to feel ill after the lunch as well and said that she'd suffered from diarrhoea.
Meanwhile, yesterday, Simon Patterson was again front and centre of the trial, giving evidence. He told the court Heather Wilkinson, one of the relatives who died, his auntie, had pointed out to him that Erin had eaten from a different coloured plate to the rest of the group. The trial's expected to run for 5 more weeks. Erin Patterson's pled not guilty to all charges of murder and attempted murder.
Heading overseas now to the US, where National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has been booted from the job following the Signalgate saga, where he accidentally added the editor of a news magazine to a high-level group chat discussing US strike plans on Houthi rebels in Yemen. In a statement released just this morning, President Donald Trump made no mention of the Signal group chat, but did nominate Waltz as the next US ambassador to the United Nations, describing him as someone who works hard to put national interests first.
Yeah, when news of this story broke in March, there were a bunch of calls from both sides of politics in the US calling for his resignation. Obviously, the louder voices being those from the Democrats. There were a few Republicans who broke rank here. The Trump administration at the time alleging that it was fake news, claiming that no sensitive information had been released. In the interim, though, it's understood that Secretary of State Marco Rubio will serve as National Security Advisor. Waltz is still needing to be confirmed by the Senate for this new ambassador role, which we've heard about for the first time in this statement that's just been released.
And a call for calm has come from one of our country's most talked about cooks of the week, Nagi Maehashi, the founder of popular website and socials Recipe Tin Eats, who earlier this week accused viral baking sensation Brooke Bellamy of plagiarising 2 of her recipes, sending socials into an absolute spin, has last night asked her followers to cool it.
Now, I know I've made serious allegations, but this does not justify the personal attacks that I've seen online against Brooke Bellamy. I do not support it, and I'm asking you to stop.
Yeah, the Sydney-based creator says it's a business and legal dispute, but asked for an end to the trolling and hate comments. It was on Tuesday that Maehashi revealed that she had made copyright infringement allegations against the publisher of Bellamy's cookbook, Penguin Random House Australia, claiming Bake with Brooki, so the book, contains her baklava and caramel slice recipes.
Yeah, look, this whole thing has blown me away. I won't lie, when I first heard about it, I had a bit of a giggle thinking like, this is over caramel slice?
Yep.
It's one of the oldest, most basic recipes. Can you seriously copyright or plagiarise something like that? But look, I will walk back my words. Apparently you can, and a lot of it comes down to the method more so. And look, in fairness, they do spend a lot of time perfecting these recipes and, you know, this is their craft. So I can absolutely understand why people are getting their knickers in a knot over this.
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw it, I was kind of like, I don't really know these creators. I've kind of seen their TikToks here and there. But what struck me the most was when I saw a side-by-side comparison of the recipes. Now, look, I'm not making any allegations. I'm just saying, go look at those side-by-sides and report back to us.
Very similar.
Very, very similar. But look, I will say above all, I'm just stoked that we're seeing the internet fighting over baklava, if I'm being completely honest with you.
Thank you, Chris. And look, that brings our headlines to a close for today. But stick around. Next up, we have our election how-to guide with everything you need to know before tomorrow. Have a listen to that up next.
Hello to the voting population of Australia. I am your election guide and guru, Chris Spyrou, and with my trusty co-host,
Tara Cassidy.
we're here to bring you what you need to know if you're not part of the millions of people who have already cast their vote and are heading to the polls today or tomorrow.
We'll answer your most common cues and bust those misconceptions so you know what to do come Saturday.
So without further ado, let's get into it.
Question 1. What will I see when I get to my voting or polling place?
Excellent question, Tara. Thank you so much for asking. So hopefully some snags on the Barbie, but that is not a guarantee anymore, as I have learnt the hard and tragic way last time I went to vote in a federal election. But what I can guarantee you will see as you rock up to your local school, church or community hall is a bunch of call flutes. So those are those big posters with candidates' faces and names on it, and maybe some volunteers repping their party or independence merch and holding how-to vote cards, which we will get into a little later.
And after you've lined up and gotten your name marked off the roll, you'll be given 2 sheets of paper that you'll fill out in one of those tiny cardboard booths. The smaller green piece of paper is where you'll see a list of names with little boxes next to them. These are the people wanting to become your electorate's federal member or MP.
Now, each electorate has just one MP and they sit in what's called the lower house. This is the green room in Canberra with the Prime Minister and opposition leader. There are 150 of these seats up for grabs at this election, so 150 MPs will be elected on Saturday. The party that can get 76 of them elected wins the majority of the House and then forms government, with their leader becoming the Prime Minister of Australia. On this green sheet, you have to number every single one of the boxes. Don't worry, there's not that many. And make sure you put a number 1 next to your favourite candidate and then a number 2 for your second fave and number 3 for your third fave and so forth and so forth and so forth.
Then we have the white ballot, the long piece of paper that barely fits in the booth. This will have the names of people looking to represent your state or territory in the upper house of government or the Senate. This is the red-coloured house that checks, amends, approves or rejects the laws that have been passed in the lower house, where your MP chills. Each state has 12 senators, while the territories have 2 each, and this is where you have the choice of voting above or below the line on that piece of paper.
Yes, and if you're in a rush and looking to get out of there as soon as humanly possible, you can vote above the line. If you choose that, you only have to number 6 boxes, putting a 1 next to the party whose senator or senators you want in the upper house the most. There's more boxes than 6. You don't have to fill them all out if you don't want to, but you actually might want to, and we'll get into why a little later.
Now, when you vote above the line, you're letting the party or group that you've chosen decide which of their candidates that you'll see listed below the line will get your vote, which is fine if you care just about that party and not the individual candidates themselves.
Yeah, if you do care about the individual candidates themselves, then you'll probably want to vote below the line. Here, you have to number at least 12 boxes, so not 6, 12, from 1 to 12, and you can do more if you want, but the incentive to doing this is because it gives you more control over where your vote goes. So what this looks like in practice, let's just say I love one of the Greens candidates on my white paper, but really hate the second and third. I would vote below the line to make sure that my vote goes to that candidate that I really, really like. If I voted above the line, all those candidates voted under the Greens, including the ones I don't like, could potentially get my vote and be up for the job.
Okay, so I've voted and I've popped my papers in the right boxes. How then is my vote counted and how do the preferences work?
So once polling places close at 6 p.m. on Saturday, AEC officials will open up and empty the big ballot boxes, sorting the green papers, so those for the House of Reps, the green room, into piles based on your first preferences.
So let's say Chris, Helen and I are all competing in your electorate to be your MP. 5 people have put a 1 next to my name, so my pile is looking good. 3 people have put a 1 next to Chris, so his pile's not too bad, but only 2 people put a 1 next to Helen's name. Unfortunately for Helen, she's in last place, so she gets knocked out of the race. But the green papers in her pile, the ballots, they live on because there's plenty more numbers on her paper that need to be taken into account. So they look at her pile and look at every single sheet to see which candidates people have listed at number 2. So remember, Helen had 2 sheets in her pile. We pick up the first one and it has Chris at number 2. So Chris, that goes onto your pile over there.
Woo-hoo!
There you go. We pick up the second one and it has me, so it joins my pile. Chris goes from 3 sheets to 4 and I've gone from 5 to 6, so I have got the majority and I win the seat.
Congratulations, Tara. I'm very proud of you. Very proud of you. Look, in reality, though, there are more than 3 candidates in this race for the House of Reps, and this process of knocking out and redistributing continues until one candidate has over 50% of the votes. Now, a way that I like to visualize this is physically they pick up the ballot papers of the candidate that's been knocked out and they move their preferences along the way. So we keep building up these piles until we find a winner. In a nutshell, why this all matters is because while the candidate that you put at number 1 is very important, it also matters who you put at 2, 3 and 4 and so on, because those are the people who will get your vote next if your favourite is eliminated along the way. This is called preferential voting, and it means your preferences can still shape who gets a seat in the House of Reps, even if your top pick doesn't win.
Now, the Senate, that big piece of paper. Well, after the polls close, the Senate ballot boxes are also opened and all the papers unfolded, and this goes through both human and computer checks. Now, this count isn't about finding someone with the majority of votes, but someone who can reach a quota based on how many people voted and how many Senate spots need to be filled in your state or territory. Now, this one is a bit more complex. There's a whole formula. We won't bore you with it, but essentially, counting and preferences work very similar to the House of Reps in that the candidates with the lowest votes, they gradually knocked out, and your preferences keep moving until they can't anymore.
Now, this is where the exhausted vote comes into play. In the Senate, because you're not required to number every single box, like on the green paper, your preferences can run out if all the candidates you voted for don't get enough votes to fill their quota.
And this is why it's a really good idea to fill out all the boxes. So you still have some say in who the next best option is if your top pick doesn't get in. And like we said, this counting process, it's really complex. And at the last federal election, the final results for the Senate, they weren't declared until nearly 4 weeks after Election Day. For the House of Reps, though, you can expect results to start coming through on Election Day, with most electorates called within about 3 days.
Okay, let's talk something I love talking about, donkey votes. Bet you thought it was when you just cast a dodgy vote by not filling it out at all or picking a party as a piss take. Well, if you did, you are wrong. A donkey vote is actually where you rock up and number the candidates on your ballot paper from 1 to 6 in the same order that they appear on the sheet. It's also a donkey vote if you do it in reverse order, so 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This doesn't kill your vote. Despite what you might think, this doesn't mean your vote gets thrown away. In fact, it's still counted as valid because all the boxes have been numbered.
What does kill your vote, though, is when it is considered an informal vote. So putting a number twice on a sheet, leaving boxes that need to be numbered empty, writing your name on a ballot, or drawing something silly instead of filling it out. These are all informal and your vote will not count.
While we're on the topic of misconceptions, let's unpack a few more that get thrown around every election and figure out what's true and what's not. Number 1, preference deals.
Okay, so this is the idea that a party that doesn't get into power can give all their votes to another party to help them get in through some kind of backdoor deal. Now, firstly, these preference deals in this format, they do not exist anymore, and only you can control who you preference and where your vote goes.
Yeah, so this is a historical hangover and the law has since changed. It actually changed in 2016. Nowadays, when we talk about preference deals, it's more to do with how one party will organise to list another on their how to vote cards. These cards show you how they would like you to number the boxes on your ballots. You, of course, don't have to listen to that advice at all. It serves only as a guide. But in all fairness, they do show you which parties or candidates your pick is most likely to work with if it needed to. So if I look at the how to vote cards the Libs put out in my electorate, they want themselves at number 1, no surprises there. Then they want the One Nation candidate at 2, an independent Independent at 3 and the Greens very last.
Yeah, and like we said, guys, preferential voting here in Australia, that's the main thing you need to remember.
Number 2, only vote for the major 2 parties. Your vote for anyone else or any other party is a waste.
That is not true. So it might be in places like the US and UK, but not here in Australia. And anyone that's telling you it is has got it wrong. Like we explained earlier, here in Oz, we use preferential voting, meaning you do decide where your vote goes. And even if they don't get in, your top pick, your next choice, or your next choice and your next choice matters. Every number you put on your card matters for who gets into power, who gets a seat at the table, and who actually gets funded for their next campaign. So if they get 4% of votes or more, they actually get a certain amount of funding for their future election campaigns.
Number 3, it's not worth voting for independents and minor parties. They don't have the power to change anything.
Ba-bow. And of course, this is the one that's often perpetuated by the major parties because, well, it benefits them. Now, we have minor parties and independents in a number of our House of Rep and Senate seats right now. In fact, there are 19 in the House of Reps, so think the Greens, Katter's Australian Party, Centre Alliance, Independents, and 22 in the Senate. One Nation, Jackie Lambie, United Australia Party, etc. You get it.
Again, because of preferential voting, your vote will go towards them. And if the party doesn't get in or they can't form government on their own, they can get a seat in the House of Reps or Senate, which can have an impact on who holds the power for important decisions. All in all, don't just listen to your friend, your dad, your mum, or some rando on socials. And if you don't know which party or candidate to pick, do go to one of those many voting tools that are out there that quiz you on your own views, interests, and beliefs and let you know which party or candidate you align with the most. That will be a massive help ahead of tomorrow.
And that brings our How to Vote explainer to an end. Thank you, Chris, and to you listening, happy voting.
Listener.